Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Pagan Happy Hour. Happy Friday. I hope you all have your drinks ready because we are going to have a really fun chat today. We'll be discussing different gods and goddesses associated with spring. So welcome everyone. Please let me know in the comments that you can hear and see me all right. And if you are new here, this is what I do every Friday at 5. We have a chat about a certain aspect of paganism. We all have a drink, and we have a good time. So today I have a lot of fun history stuff prepped for you all, so I hope you're ready. And feel free to type in the comments as we're going along because these live pagan happy hours are really meant to be not just me chatting, but a two-way discussion for us to really kind of come together as the pagan community. So I'll be bringing in your thoughts and your ideas and sharing them on the live chat. So feel free to share your thoughts, your questions, and your ideas as we continue. So let me know as well in the chat where you're from and what you're drinking today. Today I'm just having a bit of red wine, and I can see you guys in the comments here sharing as well. I see people are sharing they're from Pennsylvania, let's see, Syracuse, New York, which I actually grew up around there in the Finger Lakes. Let's see, Jamaica, Colorado, the UK. So welcome everyone who is joining me today. I'm gonna have a sip of my wine and we'll jump right into it. So I kind of wanted to start a bit about talking about some upcoming pagan holidays, because one of the benefits of this being, I guess, a weekly show is we can kind of like discuss different pagan news and events that are occurring in real time. And I can help you guys stay up to date on what's going on. And if you have been watching my channel for a while, you know I love holidays. And I've been finding out about some brand new holidays recently as well that have pagan origins. And of course, we do have some big ones coming up. We have Liberalia, which is on March 17th. And I do have a video all about the ancient Roman holiday of Liberalia. So I have that linked down below. But also next Friday, we're going to have a Liberalia themed pagan happy hour. And then the following week, we have Ostara, also known as the spring equinox, on March 20th. So we'll also be celebrating that as well. And I do have a couple videos all about the holiday of Ostara. So I have those linked down below in case you are interested in learning more about that. But I also want to give a big thanks to one of my patrons who in my Discord community, he told me about a brand new holiday that I had never heard of. March 9th, which is in a couple days, is a holiday called Oliver the Martyr's Day, and it's recognized by a lot of heathens and Norse pagans. So this is a holiday that is kind of a new creation. So a lot of modern heathens and Norse pagans honor Oliver the Martyr. And I just did a little research on him. Let's see, apparently in the year 1021, him and 11 others were preparing for the traditional feasts and sacrifices that were to be performed for the spring equinox. And at that time, celebrating those pagan festivals like the spring equinox was outlawed. So this was decreed illegal by King Olaf II. And unfortunately, Oliver was captured and killed. So he is kind of like a martyr in some ways, I guess. So a lot of heathens do recognize that day as a time to celebrate him and the fact that he kept the traditions alive, or at least tried to, even though it was illegal at the time. So I just wanted to share that with you because I just learned about it, and I want to give a big thanks to my patron Dan for sharing a wonderful Google Calendar where he put together all of these different pagan holidays. So also in pagan news, we have the full moon not too far away. Actually, I mean the new moon. The new moon in Pisces is going to be on March 13th, I believe, and currently we are in the last quarter phase. So if you are a moon tracker, I thought I'd give you an update on that. And of course, I am not an astrologer, but if you in the comments know any interesting astrological things coming up for the next week or so, feel free to add them in the chat. And yeah, let's jump right into those pagan gods and goddesses of spring. Let me take a minute to pause and have a drink. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to bring up before we jump into the different gods and goddesses of spring is that spring is really relative. So obviously spring and how it looks and feels is going to be different where you live. I was in Chicago for the past 6 years, and springtime was snowy and miserable for the most part. And here in Texas, it actually does kind of feel like spring a lot more. So keep in mind, as we're talking about different festivals and different gods and goddesses, those are all kind of connected to place, right? They can't fully be removed from the place because how they were celebrated and the ways they were honored as spring deities was connected to what spring was actually like in the countries that they were honored. So celebrating certain spring deities right now might not make sense if it doesn't quite feel like spring where you live. For example, if you are in the southern hemisphere, maybe it's not the best time to be celebrating Ostara because it's going to be fall where you live. So do keep that in mind, that there is no, steadfast rules when it comes to spring pagan holidays. It can be entirely relative and based on your specific location and, of course, your own specific branch of paganism. Let's see. I'm just checking your comments here. Green Chaos is asking about where the calendar is that lists all the pagan holidays. So that is part of my private pagan Discord. If you are interested in joining that community, you are certainly more than welcome to. You do need to be my Patreon in order to have access to the Discord community, as I do all the moderation and spend a lot of time organizing it. And I have the link down below if you are interested in joining that community, and it's been really fun. So far we have about 50 pagans and we're growing each day, and it's been a good spot to share resources like this calendar, and I have a few resources of my own, like a tarot journal and a tarot reading guide and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, let's jump into some gods and goddesses, because I know that's why you're here. So the first god or goddess associated with spring that comes to mind for me is Eostre. Sometimes she's called Ostara. And she's probably the most popular goddess associated with the spring equinox that's upcoming, but also kind of the general spring season. Now, she is a Germanic goddess, and she's a goddess of both the spring and the dawn. And I do have a whole video about Eostre and her history, so I'm not going to go too much into her today because she is more well-known, and I want to focus on some lesser known spring deities. And I do also have that video, and we're going to have a whole Ostara themed pagan happy hour closer to the equinox. But she is a really fascinating deity, though it's unclear if the ancient Germanic peoples really did celebrate her and worship her. We don't really have many written records. So all we have is the folklore that was passed down, as well as the oral tradition and the oral storytelling. So there's a bit of uncertainty on how important Eoster was for the Germanic people and how specifically she was honored, though it is believed that one of the main ways people honored her was by waking up at dawn, right? Because she is a goddess of the dawn. So waking up at dawn during the spring equinox, and also visiting local streams and wells, watery places are believed to be kind of connected to her as well. So bonfires too, because if it's a Northern European pagan festival, there's always bonfires involved, basically. So it's no different for Eoster and celebrating the spring equinox. Green Chaos has a great comment asking, I wonder what came first, the goddess or the holiday? Good question. Let's see. Yeah, and of course, feel free to, add your thoughts as we're going along here. The next goddess that I am so excited to talk to you about, because this goddess is a little bit lesser known, and there's a lot of really fascinating stuff here that really deserves its whole own video, which maybe I'll make in the future. But I want to talk about Cybele or Sabel. Not quite sure on the pronunciation there. I've seen it both ways, but I'm just going to say Cybele. It's spelled Cybele. And this is an ancient goddess from Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey, but she has evolved and changed and been a huge part of both later Greek and Roman societies. So she's a really fascinating goddess and has evolved over time. So in Anatolia, she was pretty much kind of like a mother goddess, but in Greece, she was partially kind of assimilated into aspects of the earth goddess Gaia, which you might be familiar with, as well as a fertility goddess, Demeter, which you're probably also aware of. So that was kind of her orientation in ancient Greece. But it gets really interesting when we move on to ancient Rome. So in Roman mythology and in Greek mythology in part, Cybele ruled over fertility, mountains, and fortresses. And her followers even called her the Mountain Mother and offered sacrifices to her on mountain peaks. Now, I'm not quite sure how the transition happened, but eventually she kind of became the official protector and the mother of ancient Rome. And this kind of started in the imperial period at around 205 BCE. And she had a temple, which, pardon me, I'm definitely going to pronounce this wrong. The Phrygianium, I'll spell it for you so you can look it up later. Phrygianum. So yeah, definitely do some research because it's really fascinating. So she had this temple that was dedicated to her as the Great Mother of Rome, and it was built on the Mons Vaticanus, which is Vatican Hill, right? And this hill was considered a hill of prophecy. So she had this giant temple on top of the hill, which the Vatican is now on top of. And yes, there are ruins underneath the Vatican, and there are some ancient inscriptions and stuff like that talking about Cybele and even Mitra. So that gets into a whole other realm, which I'm not going to go too deep into. But I'm just checking your comments here as we are going on. I see some corrections here. Graves is saying 205 BCE is the Republic. Are you sure it's BCE or CE? You're right. I think it might be CE. I might have misspoke there. And I see someone's helping me with the pronunciation. It's Phrygium. Is that better? Did I do a better job? Pronunciation is definitely not my strong suit. You'll know this if you've been watching me for a while. Let's see. Yes, and I see someone mentioning Prophecy Hill and how the Vatican has been co-opting pagan religions for quite a while, indeed. So also, Cybele had a really interesting consort named Attis, who preceded Jesus as a kind of like a crucified hero god. So this idea of death and rebirth is, of course, a part of many different pagan religions, which we'll get to. But specifically in Rome, during the imperial period, Attis and Cybele were a huge part of the culture of veneration. So you can kind of see how when Christianity comes into the Roman Empire, it was natural to adopt some of these things that were already honored, like with Attis, the idea of kind of like a crucified hero god. So Cybele, she had an annual spring festival that celebrated the death and rebirth of her consort Attis. And initiates into her higher mysteries, they underwent a certain baptism in bull's blood, and they did this in the temple. And after that, they were considered reborn for eternity. Sounds very similar, right, to a Christian baptism. So there is some correlation, perhaps, maybe causation, on where the origins of Christian baptism come from. Perhaps it's from the veneration of Cybele and specifically Attis and celebrating his death and rebirth and the concept of ourselves being able to be reborn from a certain type of baptism. Let's see, Graves has a comment here. I've heard the priests of Attis mutilated themselves. Yes, that is true. It's kind of nasty. The priests of Attis were eunuchs. That's the term, right? So they did castrate themselves. And that was kind of an unusual thing for ancient Roman priests, and they were celibate. So some even draw the connection between celibacy and later Christian priests. Maybe that is something also coming from the worship of Attis and the priesthood associated with Attis and Cybele. So yeah, those are really great comments there. It's kind of gross. Like I definitely recommend looking it up. Sorry if I'm messing things up. I'm just fixing my notes there. But yeah, great comment. So it does get even more interesting. I'm sorry if I'm diving too deep into ancient Roman history here. Let's see. So back to Cybele. So she was honored with a series of festivals that occurred in March. Now, they started at March 15th, and you might be aware of March 15th because that is the Ides of March. If you've read Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, I'm sure you've heard of Beware the Ides of March. But her festival began on the Ides of March, and it ended on March 28th. Now, the main festival did take place not on the Ides of March, but around the spring equinox. So she had a series of festivals for her. As the mother of Rome, of course, she was, really important to the Romans. So the whole month of March was really kind of in honor of her. But specifically around the spring equinox, she had a series of 3 really important festivals. So 24th was considered the Bloody Day. So here again, we're talking about Attis, so the death concept. March 25th was the Day of Joy, and March 26th was considered the Day of Rest. Now you can see how Cybele's festivals and the connection with Attis and Attis's festivals as well too, because they're really kind of a pair in Rome. This really does translate perhaps, or maybe Christianity adopted this and instead turned the Bloody Day into Good Friday, so the death day of Attis, and then the Day of Rest into Easter Sunday, so the resurrection of Attis. So this is a really fascinating story, and I highly recommend you look into this because there's so much here, and especially if you are interested in that transitional time between how did Rome and Europe, which was predominantly pagan, how did it become Christian? How did the Great Conversion happen? And what aspects of paganism were adopted by Christianity? Then Cybele and Attis is something to definitely look into because there's a lot there, and a lot of it is literally underneath the Vatican. So that's what I wanted to share about Cybele because she is such a lesser known goddess, and traditionally she was so greatly honored during March. I thought it'd be fun to do that little deep dive into Roman pagan history with you guys, but we're going to shift gears a little bit and chat about Persephone. So Persephone, we know, was considered a spring goddess. Plutarch himself did write about Persephone being identified with the spring season. And I'm sure you know the story of Persephone being the daughter of Demeter. She was the goddess of spring, but then she was captured by Hades and also kind of became a goddess of the underworld. So she lives with Hades for 6 months out of the year, and then in spring she comes back up to the realm of the living and helps build the fertility or the rebirth of the land. And it's interesting too, kind of thinking about this in terms of the Eleusinian mysteries. So in the Eleusinian mysteries, her return from the underworld back to the realm of the living, it was considered a symbol of immortality. You can think about how plants, go dormant in winter, but then rise again. They have this cycle of immortality. So her being a goddess of both the underworld and of spring was something that was recognized by the Greeks and was honored during this very famous ritual called the Eleusinian Mysteries. And it also explains why she was often represented in sarcophagi from the late Roman period in the city of Alexandria. I've talked a lot about the Eleusinian mysteries in a previous video I did about pagan ritual use of psychedelics, because psychedelics were a large part of the Eleusinian mysteries. It was a Greek ritual that many of our famous philosophers such as Plato took part in, and it was supposedly considered to be so transformative that their lives were completely different afterwards. We do know some things about the Eleusinian mysteries, such as the symbols. There was a mysterious black box where they created a beverage that they partook in and went on a journey. So you can see where that psychedelic aspect is possibly coming in. There's also a new book out called The Key of Immortality that dives into this much deeper. The name of the author is escaping me, but it did recently come out, and he was on the Joe Rogan podcast. So if you're really interested in that, you can look into it. But there is some fascinating connections to the concept of death and rebirth and the Eleusinian mysteries and the use of psychedelics in Greek ritual. It gets even more interesting when you bring it into Christian society, because it's believed that the aspect of communion was possibly taken from the Eleusinian mysteries, and that early communion actually involved some psychedelic substances in the earliest formations of Christianity. So really interesting stuff. I highly recommend the book, The Key of Immortality, or if you just want like a quick 5-minute, intro into the Eleusinian mysteries where you can learn more about that, I do have my video linked down below. But let's see. I see some questions here. Kira is asking, do you think it was ayahuasca? It was most likely ergot, which is a fungus that grows on wheat. And then they would mix it to make a sacred Greek beverage called kykeon. And there is a great YouTuber out there, I think his channel's called Tasting History. And he actually goes into this ancient Greek mysterious beverage called kykeon and potentially how it was created, though no one knows for sure, but there have been traces of ergot found in some pottery at locations where the Eleusinian mysteries were performed, so it's highly likely that was the psychedelic substance used. But yeah, great question. Let's see, I see someone's asking, have we talked about Bridget yet? So we're not going to talk about Bridget because Bridget is predominantly connected to Imbolc, which is in February. So I've already talked about Bridget. We did a Imbolc themed pagan happy hour a couple weeks ago that I recommend you check out, where we do a deep dive into Bridget because she is wonderful and fascinating. But for today, I wanted to focus more on deities that were more tied towards the month of March and a little bit later into the spring season. Let's see. Great questions, though. Awesome. Okay, so next deity I want to talk about is a god, and that is Osiris. And of course, we're still on this theme of death and rebirth, right? This is such an essential component to pagan societies across Europe and beyond, into ancient Egypt, for example. So Osiris is, of course, one of the most famous deities from ancient Egypt. I'm sure you're familiar with Osiris. He is the lord of the underworld, but he is also a fertility deity, kind of like Persephone here, where you have this interesting combo of underworld deity and spring deity. And it's interesting too, usually spring deities are female, but here with Osiris, we have a male deity. So, that's kind of unusual, but there were a lot of fertility deities that were men in ancient Egypt, so that's kind of interesting. And Osiris was even depicted like blue or green, kind of referencing the soil or the fertility of the soil. So he was very much a god of fertility, just as much as he was a lord of the underworld. So it's believed that people did honor Osiris at or around the time of the spring equinox. Of course, as excellent astronomers, the Egyptians were well aware of the rotations of, the planets and the sun and everything like that. So they knew when the equinox was. His rebirth being a symbolism of spring is, of course, something we've seen repeated again and again and again and again. So maybe Egypt and Osiris is the first instance of that. And then we have, Anatolia with Cybele, right? And then we have Persephone, and then eventually you have Attis and Cybele, and then maybe Jesus and Christianity. They're all part of this fascinating urge that humanity has at springtime to celebrate death and rebirth, which makes a lot of sense. You know, we're coming out of winter, we're looking forward to when things are going to start growing again. And so I probably don't need to go too much into Osiris. You know about Osiris. And oh, I see Craig here has a great comment that I was not aware of. Craig says Osiris was green when he represented life and red when he represented death. That's really interesting. I love that. Thanks for sharing. Graves is mentioning, wasn't the bit missing from Osiris the same one cut off by the Attis followers? Yes, it was. I can't get into that now without being demonetized, but great comment. And Victoria is asking here about Isis, who is, of course, the consort or the wife of Osiris. So yes, Isis is, of course, hugely important in Egyptian mythology, but there's not enough that I could find connecting her to specifically being a spring deity. Let me know if you do have any information that does connect her to the specific season of spring. Let's see. Colin has a great comment here saying that Rhea and Pan are great god and goddesses of spring and fertility. Yes, those two would fit, as well as the green man, perhaps. So yeah, there are so many fertility gods and goddesses, and that's a huge part of paganism. I mean, we celebrate that. We don't try and suppress it. So yeah, great comments. Okay. So another goddess that you might not be aware of that is a Hindu deity is Saraswati. Now, normally I don't really cover Hindu deities because there's the question of, are they pagan or not? Like, is Hinduism pagan? Kinda, but it's its own thing, kinda not, but it comes from the same root. It's a whole debate. I'm not going to do a deep dive into that now, but I thought I would, share a couple deities that are, not from Europe. So Saraswati is a Hindu goddess of knowledge, music, art, speech, wisdom, and learning. And she has been celebrated from the Vedic period all the way through to modern day. And in imagery, she has 4 arms, and like many Hindu deities, she has different symbolic items or objects in her hands in each of these arms. So for her, she's usually holding a book, a rosary, a water pot, and a musical instrument. And Hindus usually celebrate her during the festival of Vasant Panchami. Sorry again if I'm pronouncing this incorrectly. Which is on the 5th day of spring according to the Hindu calendar. And what I love about Saraswati and how Hindus celebrate her is that they often honor her by celebrating this day, this particular holiday, by teaching children the letters of the alphabet on this particular day, because she is a goddess, not just of this time of year, but mainly of knowledge and wisdom. So I just thought that was a really cute fact that people use this day as the day to teach children their letters. So I wanted to share that with you guys, and I have one more deity for you all. And before I get to it, let me check your comments here because I see some more questions coming in. Let's see. Shadow Walker is asking which aspect of the Morrigan represents spring. I do not know that. Let me know in the comments if you do. I wouldn't necessarily consider the Morrigan a spring deity. So let's see. Great comment though, and good question. Yeah, lots of good questions. I see a question here about any notable Norse and Celtic gods and goddesses associated with spring. So, from the Norse pantheon, some people associate Freya with spring as she is the goddess of fertility. However, I haven't found any specific references that tie Freya to spring in particular. So let me know if you know anything about that. Of course, she is a goddess of fertility, um, but I wouldn't necessarily consider her a spring deity. Let's see. And then I have another question here from Kat. What season is Carowind associated with? I do not know that. I don't think it's spring, though. I would say that's more of a winter, but I could be wrong on that. So please do correct me. And of course, I did mention Aosta earlier on, who is a Germanic goddess, so she is often honored by heathens. Some Norse pagans honor her, but I didn't want to go too deep into Aosta because I'm going to have a whole Ostara party for Pagan Happy Hour in a couple weeks. So on to the last goddess. So I wanted to bring in some Slavic deities because I know you guys have been clamoring for that. So I thought I would talk about Marzana or Marina. So Marzana is, I think, the Polish name. Marina is the Russian name, but she's also celebrated in the Czech Republic and in other areas as well. So she is a Slavic goddess associated with seasonal rites around the concept of death and rebirth. Again, right? Such a theme, such a theme for the spring, right? But this specifically, the death and rebirth in nature. And she is a really kind of ancient goddess, and she kind of symbolizes the death of a winter and the rebirth of spring. So instead of certain deities kind of dying and being reborn, like we talked about with Attis or Osiris, she's more representing the general death of the season of winter and the general rebirth of the season of spring. And she's usually celebrated around the spring equinox. So she's not as popular, of course, nowadays, but how she is usually celebrated is, this is more celebration for young people and school children, where they will have celebrations along with local folklore groups, and they do a procession of children, and they carry effigies or dolls that are made in the shape of her or her male counterpart deity called Marzanok. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. And they take these effigy dolls representing them and throw them into a nearby lake or pond. And then they sing some traditional songs. And I guess this idea of throwing the effigy into the water symbolizes the death of winter so that spring can be reborn. I see some corrections here. I'm just checking. I do see a comment here from Just Sima says, in Ukraine, we still practice those traditions. Awesome. Yeah, I am still brand new to Slavic paganism and mythology. So this is something I'm really interested in. He also adds that there is additionally a tradition of burning the goddess effigies. So that makes sense, kind of all tying into that death and rebirth concept that is so essential for this time in spring. So let's see, just checking any more information, any more comments you guys have for me. I see someone has a comment here. Can we talk about how that is not very eco-friendly, throwing dolls into the water? It's probably not very eco-friendly, though you probably could and should use natural materials, maybe make the doll out of straw or something like that. But yeah, great comments. And thanks for letting me know and correcting me, because I am by no means an expert here, and I am brand new to Slavic paganism, but it does seem to be growing. I do think there are more and more people who are interested in that tradition and interested in seeking out information from it. So those were all the deities that I wanted to share with you today. Now, if you have deities that I did not mention that you think are associated with spring, please let me know, because of course we are just starting into spring. So there's going to be lots of opportunities to share more information about the gods and goddesses associated with this time period. So let me have a sip of my wine, because that was quite a lot of talking. I see in the comments here, Daka is saying, oh gosh, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Jarilo and Vesna, 2 Slavic deities of spring. I'll definitely look into that. The Neon Cicada says, we deify the black bear as a form of the dark mother. Is that in the Slavic tradition? That sounds so fascinating. I see Anna here. It says, would Flora be a good one, as she's a goddess of flowers? I think she would. I wonder, would she be a better goddess of spring or summer? Maybe both. But yeah, that's a good point. She is perfect to talk about right now. I see a comment here about the eco aspect of celebrating these holidays, and that there's a whole movement in India for statues to be made of natural materials instead of spray painted ones. So yeah, that's wonderful. I think that's great. Someone's asking me if I have moderators in the chat. No, I am a one-woman show, so I'm doing this all on my own. So please be kind. I'm not big enough yet to have moderators. Let's see. I see here a comment about Cerunos, as in the Celtic pantheon, being a spring god. You know, good question. Is he a spring deity? Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a fertility deity, so I could see that. I could definitely see that connection there. Someone's mentioning Aphrodite, of course, another fertility goddess, so it does kind of fit to fit in for this time. Let's see, Colin's mentioning Sif and Skadi as 2 great Norse goddesses. So yeah, I'm not sure if I would consider them spring goddesses. But yeah, you guys are sharing so many wonderful gods and goddesses here. Yeah, let's see. It's going so fast. And then I see someone's mentioning Ishtar. Yes, the concept of the name Ostara, did that come from Eostre, the Germanic goddess, or the ancient Near Eastern goddess Ishtar? It's a bit unknown. Could go either way. Maybe that's something we'll get into when we do our Ostara-themed Pagan Happy Hour. Let's see. Great comments here. Okay. Oh, I see Idun being the goddess of dawn. Great comment, Victoria. Idun would be a pretty good goddess to associate with this time. If we know that Eostre is a goddess of dawn and spring, then it would make sense that Idun could also be considered a goddess of dawn and spring. Let's see, Sky is mentioning that the month of April is named after Aphrodite, which is a spring month. I did not know that. So yeah, that's great. Very cool. Let's see, someone's mentioning the dawn and spring are kind of like the same concept. I love that idea, because spring is the dawn of life, right? After winter. So I could definitely see the ancient pagans making that connection. I see someone mentioning here Demeter and Persephone. So yeah, there are a ton of spring gods and goddesses, because there really are a ton of fertility gods and goddesses. So it makes sense to tie at least some of them into the spring season. And of course, how you honor these different deities this month is up to you. You know, you're welcome to do what you want. There are no rule books when it comes to paganism. You can honor them through something like, you know, for the spring equinox, if you want to celebrate Eoster, wake up at dawn and go to your nearest stream. Or, you know, you can set up your altar and honor one of the deities there. So there's so much you can do at this time of year to really celebrate. And it's a great time too to kind of reconnect with nature as well. Anna is asking, is it wrong to celebrate Easter as a pagan? I get this type of question a lot from people who are either coming from Christianity, or maybe they have family members that are Christian, or maybe they just really like the holiday, the Christian holiday, and are kind of unsure. So Easter is really interesting because so many of the fun aspects of Easter are actually pagan, right? Because you have the bunny rabbits, fertility, obviously. We know bunnies get down. We got the eggs, again, fertility, Easter eggs, just again a symbol of fertility. And all the spring imagery. All of that is tying back to early pagan celebrations of the spring equinox when you would be honoring fertility. So if you like to celebrate with Easter eggs and candy and peeps and bunny imagery and decorate your house, by all means, all of that's pagan. So go right ahead. Really, the only non-pagan thing about Easter is going to Mass, right? So really, you can celebrate almost everything associated with Easter, and you would still be celebrating it as a pagan. Yeah, I see a comment here about dyed Easter eggs traditionally being used as buried under the threshold of the front door to ward off bad spirits. Yeah, definitely. I see a tarot question. Would you associate wands, the wand suit, or the fire element with spring? Good question. I think yes, to a certain degree. Definitely. Let's see. If I had to think about the 4 suits and tie them to the different seasons, swords would be winter. I think that's an easier one. I would almost say cups are spring. And then, yeah, I would say cups are spring, wands are summer, pentacles, no. Cups are spring, then pentacles are summer, and then autumn is wands. Tricky though, really tricky. I'll have to think on that more. I might change my mind on that, but good question. I see someone says, honestly, Mass is kind of pagan too though, LOL. Yeah, totally. I mean, especially once you read the Key of Immortality book, or you research the Eleusinian mysteries and you realize how much of Mass and the Eucharist is tied up to ancient Greek and Roman traditions. Yes. Let's see. Great comment. Let's see. Awesome. So last few things I want to share with you guys before we sign off today. So first thing I want to mention is a lot of you guys were asking about my Discord community. That is fairly new. I did create it and launch it a couple weeks ago because I wanted a way for us all to chat and be able to chat during the week, and be able to share resources and texts and everything associated with paganism. So I do have that link down below. And yes, it is connected to my Patreon, so you have to be one of my patrons. So that's $5 a month for access to the Discord and some other stuff. And that's because I run it all, you know, it takes a lot of time and effort. And I hope you guys think it's worth it. I worked really hard on it, and I really want to be able to create ways that we can all come together and share resources. Also, I want to give a shout out to a shop that sent me a couple things. So I do have a link for a pagan shop called Raven's Roost down below in the description. and a promo code. And they sent me this book that I've been reading that I would highly recommend for any tarot enthusiast, and especially anyone who's really interested in the history of tarot and the history of the symbolism. This book dives deep into these ancient symbols and where tarot actually originates. So it's really fun for history nerds and tarot nerds. So thanks, just want to give them a big thanks for sending me this book, because I've been having so much fun reading it, and I've been marking it up like crazy. Just so many underlines and notes. It's been so fun. And yeah, I just want to give you guys a big thanks for watching today. Thanks for being part of the community. Thanks for sharing your thoughts and ideas. I feel like I learned so much from the chat and you guys sharing with me and helping me through some of these things. And I'm sorry if I mispronounced everything or got a few facts incorrect here or there. I am just one person, but thank you all for joining me and for sharing your thoughts and ideas. And I think it's awesome. It's finally spring, kind of. Technically, spring doesn't start till the equinox, but it's starting to feel springy a bit. And I am just so happy I could be here to share my Friday evening with you all. So thank you guys. This has been a great chat. I'll be responding to any comments, so feel free to keep commenting afterwards. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next week. Bye.